name is Brant, that's Brant, Menswar, Menswar. Brant Menswar is one of the country's top 10 motivational speakers, a critically acclaimed author, award-winning musician, we got a lot in common, podcast host, another thing in common, and the CEO and founder of Rockstar Impact, a boutique agency that teaches people and organizations how to cultivate values-based leadership. His work has influenced the culture of some of the world's leading organizations. Passionate, engaging, and transformational, Brant encourages audiences to move forward with deliberate intention. His interactive and entertaining techniques of defining what matters most compel audience to dive deeper into their lives, identify their black sheep values, and speak their life-changing power into existence. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, none other than Brant Menswar. Brant, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing, Mark?
I am doing wonderful. As I shared with you, whenever I hear my guest's voice in the morning, that I get great. For sure.
That's right.
Only because, like I said, it's so early, and and the funny thing is, a couple of years ago, up until the last couple of years, my guest actually appeared in the 6 o'clock hour. And so depending on what time zone you're in, I've had West Coast guests that would be up at 3 o'clock in the morning to meet me at 6 o'clock in the morning our time. I mean, are you on the East? You're in Florida, correct?
I am. Yes.
Okay, so you're on the East Coast with me. At least it's 7 o'clock your time there too with me. All right, it's not too bad. But
that's right.
So congratulations on the release of Black Sheep.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
I was sharing with Brant before we went on the air that, interestingly enough, because I'm on Amazon all the time in terms of Kindle, because I download all my books there onto my iPad, onto Kindle. And I was going through there, and I saw his book prior to its release. It was a couple of weeks ago prior to it. So Amazon must have been promoting it as a pre-order. And I looked at it and I said, when that comes out, I'm going to get that. And then another friend of mine who has actually been on the show, Tammy Barlett, Tammy hit me on LinkedIn and said, I have some friends that I believe would be great for your show. I was like, great, give me the name. So when she gave me Brant's name, I said, now for some reason that name sounds familiar. Then when I pulled up the book cover, I said, that's the book I was looking at a couple weeks ago. And, I reached out to Brant and we stayed in contact with each other on LinkedIn, and we set to date as the date to have our interview. And I'm really happy because the book just came out. So that means this is only a couple of weeks old, if that we have an opportunity to speak with him, because it is hot off the press. It is fresh off the press. And again, it's a very easy title. You cannot forget it. Black Sheep. Unleash the extraordinary, awe-inspiring, undiscovered you. Now, we're going to have an interesting conversation because right off the bat, when you hear the word black sheep, it has a different connotation and denotation depending on who you are and your experience. So we'll talk a little bit about that and some of the other things that we talked about in Brant's bio that I just read. So again, Brant, good morning.
Good morning.
So I'll tell you what, I don't have a question sheet per se, but I usually do try to help the listening audience understand, where did this all begin? Where did you're like what I consider a Renaissance man. I consider myself a Renaissance man. I see you're a Renaissance man as well.
Yeah.
Where does kind of all this begin? Because I see there's an interesting combination here that I totally connect with, because I'm in the same boat with you in terms of the musician, podcaster. Matter of fact, the music that's playing behind us is from one of the CDs I released. So,
oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I actually had two instrumental jazz CDs that I released, and I use them for backdrops on the show. And
that's
so
fantastic.
So, I have a podcast as well in addition to this show. So I totally get it. But where did it, for you, where did all of this start?
Well, I grew up in Manchester, New Hampshire, just outside of Boston, up in New England, and spent most of my early life as a competitive athlete, and had planned on playing professional baseball. Is sort of what my plan A, if you will, and went to college to play baseball and ended up getting hurt, and that hurt my ability to be drafted and move forward with that dream. And so I had to sort of find something else to do, and sort of stumbled upon music, and slowly began to sort of dip my toe in that water, even in college. And it wasn't until I think I was 30 years old before I quit my job and started to play music full time. and then have spent, the better part of the last 20 years in the music business, 2 different bands, 2 different record deals, just really blessed to travel the world and play music for a living. And did that really up until 2012. And then in 2012, my oldest son got really sick and was battling cancer. And so we had to sort of come off the road and spent the better part of a year in the hospital with him. And then when we came out, I just knew that I was going to have to come off the road and not be gone as much as I had been. And so that led me to sort of the speaking stage, the keynote conference speaker stage. So I sort of traded one stage for another, and have been speaking and writing since 2012.
That is amazing for so many different reasons. And one of the reasons is amazing. One, whenever I'm not doing radio, I'm actually the principal of a school. And my school happens to be a single gender school, all boys school. It's a leadership academy. I have grades 3 to 8. And when I heard you say your plan A was to become a professional athlete, immediately my mind went to my boys, because out of the 70 or 80 boys or so I serve, probably 60, 70% of them, their plan A is to go either to the NBA, to the NFL, or the MLB, or the National Soccer League, or whatever. So the fact that you now said, all right, I got hurt, that's the message we're always trying to say. Okay, that's great that you have that dream, but what now happens in the event? What's your backup plan? What's your plan B? What's your next plan? It's almost like, I hate to say A, B, C, D. It's like, okay, what are you going to do in the event that you don't make it to one of the L's?
That's right.
So
that's right.
To hear you say that, and then you were able to transition into being a musician. So had you taken music lessons, or were you already a musician when you were as a child or a teenager?
Well, I took guitar lessons as a kid for, maybe 6 months before, my attention span left. And so I dabbled in it for, my high school years and in college years, but didn't really take it seriously. And to be honest with you, the music thing, I was a pitcher playing baseball.
Yep.
And I was just looking to try to replace that feeling that I would get when I would stand on the mound and face an opponent. And being on the stage performing music as sort of the lead singer of a band was the closest thing I could find to mimicking that feeling. And, interesting enough, I never really had a plan B. I wouldn't even say that what I'm doing now is a plan B, C, or D. It wasn't the plan at all. It just sort of, as I got clearer with the things that mattered most to me in my life, the career path that I took also became much more clear. And I can finally say at 49 years old that I feel like I'm doing what I was meant to do.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said, the transitions are, first off, I'm sitting here blown away because the similarities between me and you, or the commonalities or the things that we have in common, is like amazing. And I don't know if you, at some point, if you get a chance to see my bio or just from our conversation today, you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm like stunned because I also, whenever I played baseball, was a pitcher. And I know exactly, and I also love public speaking, being on stage. I play, my main instrument is keyboards, but I took up bass guitar about a year or so ago, started dabbling around with that. So I totally get what you're saying in terms of like just being in the spotlight, knowing that one is one stage or the other, one or the other. And you have some people. Also, I have the opportunity to teach public speaking on the college level. And one of the things I always tell the students is, this is literal, not figurative. There are people who would rather die than to get up on the stage like I'm watching on your website right now.
Yes.
Literally rather die. And for me, I can be sitting in the middle of Yankee Stadium with a stadium full of people and get on the stage and it wouldn't faze me. People are different. Everybody's different. So when I come across somebody like you that's like, wow, that's just like a mirror image.
Well, it's different, as you know, too. It's been difficult to try to find something to replace that feeling.
Right.
And it takes a minute, right? And so, part of the idea with this book was and I help people find a path to sort of achieving what they want in their life and not have it take 47 years like it did myself before I decided to get serious about what it was that I wanted to do. And so, the idea for me is that our lives are sort of broken up into three areas, right? We sort of have the what, the why, and the how. We have the what, which is what are your non-negotiables? What are those deeply held personal core values that are at your very core? The why is your purpose. Why are you here on this planet? And then the how is your mission. How are you going to fulfill that purpose on a daily basis? And so the how changes all the time. And if your what and your why are aligned, you become really adaptable and resilient in how you're choosing to honor it. Well, I hadn't done that until I was 47 or so years old. And so, the adaptability and resilience was really replaced with winging it. And I became pretty much a professional in the sport of winging it. And that's where most of us are today.
Well, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but it's no such thing as a wasted experience. In other words, everything we do contributes to where we wind up being. So no experience is ever wasted. So I hear exactly what you're saying. But at the same time, it was all those experiences that got you to this point where you are now. And that's there. I mean, I always tell people all the time, I am not mad at anybody that can do one thing all of their life. I'm not. That's, like I said, people are different. But I am really fascinated with somebody like you, who can transition from one thing to the other, whether it be athletics to music to motivational speaking to podcasting to writing a book.
Sure.
I'm always fascinated with that. And I'm looking here, even on your website, I see you've already, the rock and roll with it, overcoming the challenge of change. Is that already out or is that upcoming?
No, that was my first book.
That's your first
came
book.
Out about 2 years ago. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. So when did the writing piece come in?
Well, the writing piece, if I'm going to be 100% authentic and real with you, which is important to me, the writing came out of the need to have a book to sell when I'm speaking on stage. In the speaking world, if you are a speaker/author, you can raise your fee immediately by 25 or 30% and have something else to sell and have these things for organizations to order books and give as gifts to attendees and that sort of thing. And so my original book was sort of written to have something to put me into that speaker-author category and to have something to sell at these corporate conferences that I was speaking at. And that was the initial push for me to actually have a book in hand.
Now, see, that's interesting, too, because, and Brant is absolutely correct when you get on the speaking circuit. It is much more effective. You are much more, quote unquote, valuable if you have a book along with your public speaking. That's the one thing I haven't done yet. Because public speaking, motivational speaking, is actually where you are, Brant, is where ultimately I want to get to. I want to travel around the country speaking. So that's the one piece. I mean, I've had an opportunity to do it a little bit, but not to the point where I can just let my job go and that's all I do. So, but you're absolutely right in terms of the writing of a book. So I see you connected music with it. But now, because this is the thing with that I love already, I can tell by your book titles and the subtitles. You connect something that everybody knows, but there's an underlying message. So this one is overcoming the challenge of change. Let's talk a little bit about that. And I heard you say, whenever we were talking about you had to shift gears when your son became sick.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that whole notion of overcoming change, and then we're going to work our way into Black Sheep.
Sure. So that book was written because I believe we all face two types of change in our lives on a regular basis. We face intentional change. That's the type of change that we want to make, right? We want to lose 20 pounds. We want to change our life in a particular way that we are sort of controlling our actions and decisions for. And then there's the unintentional change that is forced upon us, something like my son's cancer. And so how do you respond? How do you react when you face both of these types of change? Because they're very different in our response. And that is what that first book is all about, is teaching us how to respond to these different types of change.
And I tell you what, in the days that we're living in right now, in terms of change, I don't think a book could probably be more valuable than any book that's written on how to cope with change. Because since March,
yeah, right.
In education, we've been doing everything virtual. The kids are home. All I kind of see them is on a computer screen. Same with my teachers. And that is a big change. And then, like you were just saying, that's one of those, like, what did you call them? The change is forced upon you?
That's unintentional change.
Right. So that's what we've had, an unintentional change as of the beginning of the year. And then an illness, like you were saying. And how is your son doing, by the way?
So he is doing well. We went through this ordeal with him when he was 14 years old. He was diagnosed with this rare blood cancer. It's a form of leukemia. And he was going to need to have a bone marrow transplant to survive. And so, we sort of found an unrelated donor to start that process, and his brother wasn't a match for him, and so we found that donor. We got started in the hospital. It was supposed to be 30 days in the hospital or so, and our journey was, we spent 263 straight days at Florida Hospital for Children.
Wow!
And during the process, the transplant went fine. But then he developed something called graft versus host disease. And this is where the marrow that's inserted into the body, it doesn't recognize the environment that it was placed in, and so it begins to attack the body. And so this is what was happening. And the way that they treat it is they super suppress your immune system so the body won't fight. And so while they did that, he ends up contracting a deadly fungus while he's in the hospital. And so the way that you treated the fungus was you super boosted the immune system to try to give the body a way to fight it off. And so we had two things that were threatening his life with opposite treatments. And so we got pulled in to the parents' lounge after a couple of 100 days in the hospital. And, this row of doctors looked at my wife and I and said, "We're so sorry. We don't think he's going to make it. No matter what we treat, the other's going to take his life. He's probably not going to make it through the night. You should probably go say your goodbyes and call whoever you need to call." And so, we weren't prepared at that moment to hear that. And so we, what do you do when you're faced with a row of experts telling you that your son's not going to survive? So, we stood up and walked back to his hospital room and grabbed his younger brother, who was 3 years younger than him. And, we sat on the edge of the bed and you try to find the words to say goodbye. And I tell people all the time, those of you that are parents, if you sit on the edge of your bed and hear your child say, "I'm going to miss you, Daddy," it's something that you never truly recover from. And in that moment, I had to call my younger brother, who lives 1,500 miles away, still in New Hampshire, where we were born. And I had to tell him that he wasn't going to have time to make it. And if he was going to say his goodbyes, he was going to have to do it over the phone. And so he did, and was incredibly distraught, as you can imagine, and hung up the phone and just was so unsettled and feeling helpless that he decided he was going to sit on his couch. He was going to film himself holding up these poster boards, sort of describing the scenario. "My nephew's dying. This is what he has. This is what we've tried. Here are the drugs he's been on." And in this sort of Hail Mary attempt at finding help, he never said a word. He simply played the song "Fix You" by Coldplay from start to finish. And when the song ended, the poster boards went down, and that was the end of the video. And he uploaded it to YouTube that night. Well, my son Theo made it through the night. I sat on the edge of the bed all night, sort of waiting for him to pass. And as I'm sitting there, my phone is ringing off the hook the next morning. I'm trying to ignore it and just be present in the moment and spend every last second that I can with him. And after a few hours, my phone is literally hot from vibrating all morning. And so I finally grab the phone and I look at it, and I see all these numbers and names from people that I don't know. Well, what I didn't realize is that I didn't know my brother made this video, and I didn't know that he uploaded it to YouTube. And by the time that I picked up my phone that morning, the video had been seen by over 500,000 people. And I was getting messages from people from all over the world. This video had gone viral. And I had a voice message from a doctor at MD Anderson in Houston who said, "Hey, I saw this video and I got your number." He happened to be one of the leading researchers on this fungus that was killing him. And he said, "There's this alternate treatment that's brand new that I don't know that your doctor's aware of. Would you mind if I talk to him? It might be able to help." And so we said, "Yes, absolutely." And then I get a call from Dr. Tim Johnson from Good Morning America. And he says, "Get me a list of anyone you want to speak to, and I'll do my best to make it happen in the next 24 hours. And so we made a list of a doctor at Dana-Farber in Boston and a research doctor at Cornell University. And the four doctors put their heads together, and they came up with this crazy plan to try to save Theo's life. And it worked. And so we went from within a 24-hour time span of say your goodbyes to having a plan that actually saved his life. And Theo just turned 23 years old and was just before COVID, was the first time he was in a classroom setting since the 8th grade.
Well, you know what? God bless and thank God. And, because it's like, there's a couple of things, and this is why I really don't use a patent question list, because as I shared with you before going on, it's very conversational because my questions literally are generated from the conversation.
Sure.
What I'm hearing here in terms of, first off, the fact that your brother, the impact and the power of social media, the fact that you could do that and then that many people log on and look and listen and respond, that is just... talk about awesome. That's awesome. And thank God it happened because it literally saved your son's life. The other piece of this is many times people think those of us or those who are on stage or who have written books or who play music or who travel the world, they don't think calamity strikes us. They think we're immune. If you're a rock star, if you're an author, they think you're immune to life.
Yeah.
And so what I heard from that was, even though I played baseball, I've written books, I'm a motivational speaker, I'm this, I'm that, still life happens. And you have to be able to deal with it. And as your book says, rock and roll with it.
Yeah. Yes. And that's, to be honest with you, some of the biggest lessons in life come from these tragedies. And so while we're going through this, I realize that I made, during this time in the hospital, I made some of the worst decisions I ever made in my life. And that's because I never had taken the time to define what my non-negotiables were. What were those foundational core values that guide the decisions in your life? And I was in my early 40s at that time and still had never taken the time to really do it. And that was really the birth of my new book, Black Sheep, is trying to get people to define these things so when they find themselves with an incredible storm or challenge that they're facing in their life, that they're much better prepared to make a good decision in that moment and don't flail around like I did making bad decisions because I didn't define these things that were most important to me.
Which is a very good segue into Black Sheep. For those in the listening audience, if you don't know who you're listening to, first off, this is your host, Marc Medley, and my guest this morning on the Reading Circle is Brant Menswar. Let me ask you a question. In terms of your last name, and I know they do because they get my name messed up. I mean, I have two syllables, Medley. Do a lot of people get your last and think it's Menswear?
Oh, everybody gets my name wrong. And if my last name was truly Menswear, I would be a billionaire because you visited my department in every store known to mankind. But yes, the funny thing is my grandfather changed the spelling of our last name because it's Polish. And the original spelling was Mynczywor,
Okay.
which you can understand why most people would look at that and have no idea
Right.
how to pronounce that. So
Yeah, if you were a teacher in the school, they call you Mr. M.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's why he was like, you know what, I'm just going to make this easy. It's Menswar. It's really easy, just like it's spelled out, Menswar, Menswar. And, I've spent 49 years now with people laughing or calling it menswear, or, butchering my first name as Brant.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I know, because I can, when I looked at you, I said, I know, I'm going to ask this question for sure, that the menswear, I know you get that, and people would see Brant as Brent, because again, I'm Mark, but I'm not spelled M-A-R-K, I'm spelled M-A-R-C. So that's the first thing. Everything I get has M-A-R-K on it. And like I said, my last name, it really is very easy. Medley, 2 syllables. But I get Medler, I get Medlac, I get Melody. I mean, it's just, oh my. So that's why I said I'm definitely asked you this question. But for folks, we strayed a little bit. But if you don't know who you're listening to, my guest is Brant Menswar, and he's written books. We were talking about his first one, Rock and Roll With It, in terms of change, which led now to the second book, which is Black Sheep. And as I was sharing with you all, if you caught me before 7 o'clock, I was explaining to you that the book cover has a sheep head on there, and the word black is in the color black, and the word sheep is in the color white. And it's unleashed the extraordinary, awe-inspiring, undiscovered you. And everything that authors do, and most of my guests, let me put it that way, most things that authors do are very intentional, even down to their covers. So when a decision is made to put the word black in black and the word sheep in white, that's intentional. The title in and of itself was intentional, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, because the word black sheep has a connotation to it. And I will tell you this, Brant, you taught me something in terms of, because I was reading through the book. I don't get a chance to read them from end to end until usually after the interview is over. But I was going through the first chapter or two, and I hadn't been on your website yet. And when I went on your website, the very thing that leaped out at me reading the book is the point that you pull up on your website. And that was the whole, how we came across the definition of black sheep to begin with. I didn't realize that. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But let's talk about, okay, we went through your first book and you've gone through changes, and now you're talking core values and everything, and we come up with black sheep. Walk us through that.
Well, as I told you, that this idea of defining the things that matter most to you, so you're in a better position. What happened after my son survived was, for the next 5 years or so, I went to bed every night with one question on my mind, which was, I wonder if he thinks I gave up on him. Because in the moment the doctors told me to go say my goodbyes, I went back to that room and I said my goodbyes. And if I knew then what I know now of what my non-negotiable values are, that conversation that I had with my son would have been incredibly different. It would have been filled with these non-negotiables that I now hold so dearly to. And, that sort of whole process of figuring out what these were and seeing the power that they possess in my life now is really what I wanted to get across. And so, interesting enough, I was 47 years old when somebody finally explained to me the truth as to why farmers don't value black sheep like the rest of the flock. And when I heard the truth, I was so shocked that I had lived 47 years without anybody explaining to me that this is the real reason that it really led to the writing of this next book. And so the truth as to why farmers don't value black sheep like the rest of the flock is that a black sheep's wool cannot be dyed. So every black sheep, in effect, is 100% authentically original. And when I read
that's the part that leaped out at me the same way. Yeah. I mean, I immediately highlighted that, and because now don't feel bad. You said you were how old when you learned?
47.
All right, don't feel bad because I'm 58. And
There you go.
so, and I'm saying, and I've heard the term, I've heard the colloquialism, I've heard the cliche, I've heard it, and but I had never had the definition of it. So when I read that, I said, it says, have you ever wondered why actual black sheep are cast aside, ostracized, and not valued like the rest of the flock? The reason shocked me. A black sheep's wool cannot be dyed. That's right. A black sheep is 100% authentically original. Now, the other piece of this is the spin that you put on it, because some would still look at that as a negative, and you flipped it to a positive.
So the end of that story is that while farmers don't value black sheep the same way that they value the rest of the flock, that doesn't mean that black sheep don't possess value. They absolutely do, but in a very different way.
Correct.
So farmers keep one black sheep for every 100 white sheep in their care as a marker. So every morning, a sheep farmer wakes up, he looks out over his flock, and if he has 500 sheep in his care, he should see 5 black sheep. If he doesn't see 5 black sheep, he knows something is wrong. It could be famine, disease, wolves, whatever it might be. But it's the black sheep's ability to stand out from the flock that get the farmer's first look every morning. Now, in my life, I want to get everybody's first look.
Correct.
I want to be my wife's first look. I want to be my kids' first look. I want to be my community's first look. I want people to look to me so that I can have that type of impact that I want in the world. And so how do we get someone's first look? We get that first look by leading with those black sheep values, those values that are deeply held within you, that no matter how much someone wants to try to twist or change or make them something they're not, we lead with those values that cannot be changed, those black sheep values, just like a black sheep's wool. And when we lead with them, we get everybody's first look because they're seeing us for who we were created to be, that unique 100% original.
Absolutely. Like I said, that's totally like you really opened my eyes in terms of that. As a matter of fact, if someone were to read your book, and I'm recommending the book, I'm recommending that you all go out, because that's part of the purpose of having the authors on, is to expose their work and then for you to read it. But this is not only like a read just for the sake of reading. It is to learn something by. And I would think that after reading, because after the first chapter, I would think that folks would now hear that, or being called as a black sheep, as a badge of honor. In other words, a lot of times when you hear black sheep, it was kind of like you were the aberrant one in the family if you were considered the black sheep. But after looking at it from this lens, it would be, yes, please call me a black sheep.
Well, if someone's calling you a black sheep, my guess is it's because they've witnessed one or more of those undeniable, unchangeable values that you possess, which is amazing that they're actually seeing it when most of the world is part of that 495 other sheep that look exactly the same. And so this idea of standing out and being that unique original really comes from people witnessing what your non-negotiable values truly are.
And that is, and again, now here in 2020, again, just like with the Change book, I think the whole non-negotiables, core values, again, is more important than ever, based on that we're constantly being challenged with kind of looking at, well, what is your core values? What do you stand for?
Well, there's never been a more important time, I feel, at least in our lifetimes, than to do this work now. Pick your battle of the moment, whether it's, if we're looking at COVID and we're looking at the safety precautions or wearing masks, or we're looking at the political landscape with who you're going to vote for, or what party you are aligning yourself with or candidate. Look at the civil unrest that we are facing right now, and movements like Black Lives Matter. You need to know what matters most to you.
Correct.
To be able to lend your voice to the things that you care about. And that is why it's so important to do this work.
One of my uncle's favorite sayings, my mother's brother, he's passed on now, but one of the things he used to say all the time was, you got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything.
That's right.
And he would say that. It was my Uncle Lonnie. He would say that all the time. It's like, you got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. But
one of the real sort of pitfalls, Mark, is that if you don't define these things, if you don't know what your black sheep values are, then my question becomes, what's driving your decisions?
Exactly. And I'm looking here again at the bio. I was going a little bit further down. Let me see something I saw. Now I got to go back to it. I'll come back to it. But it was something that was written in here that caught my eye. Probably in another tab, but I'll come back to it. But you're absolutely right in terms of, and leadership. And because I see you doing a lot of motivational speaking to various organizations and companies. But it is so critical in leadership to have that, because you just can't be all over the map. And I've experienced that even as the principal of a school. You got, and sometimes the decisions you make, people just don't like them, but you got to make them be based on, again, the core values.
If you're making decisions that are born from those things, one of the big learns from the book, and this is something that was incredibly difficult for me to discover and accept, is that we don't control outcomes.
Correct.
Right? We don't control outcomes. We only control the deliberate intention that goes into making decisions. But once the decision is made, the outcome is out of our control. The challenge is most of us go to work every day in a job that promotes people based on one thing, and that's outcomes or results.
Correct.
Well, what can happen is people can make some really bad decisions that are witnessed by the entire organization, but somehow, some way, that really bad decision produced a good result, and those people get promoted, and it slowly erodes the culture of the organization, because no one's looking at the deliberate intention that went into making a decision. They're only looking at the outcome or result.
Correct.
That's something that's called outcome bias. And there's an entire science and study behind outcome bias that says you can't use, after the fact, you can't use an outcome to justify whether a decision was good or bad. So we have to go back to the decision-making process. And if you know that a good decision is born from these black sheep values, it considers all the facts you can get your hands on, and it honors what you're feeling and acknowledges what you're feeling in the moment, then you've made a good decision, regardless of the outcome, and you can sleep better at night knowing that you've honored these things that matter most to you.
Absolutely. And I see the part, it says, it's right here in the black box. As a motivational speaker, podcast host, and founder and CEO of Rockstar Impact, Brant Menswar has inspired thousands of people to tap into their full potential for success. And this is what we're talking about, by aligning their black sheep values. Now, in this high-octane, entertaining how-to guide, he delivers one-of-a-kind wisdom for living the amazing life you were always meant to. You will find out how to identify the non-negotiables that are at your core, to live with deliberate intention, and practically manifest what matters to you most. You will discover what makes you an extraordinary original, and how being uniquely yourself is a power you can set free from success every day. Now, one of the things that leaped at me whenever I even picked up your book was something that, again, it was instilled and ingrained in me from a tiny child from my mother and father, and that was think for yourself. Mm-hmm. In other words, it wasn't a matter of you don't have to be like the crowd. And so that's what came to me whenever I started reading your book was, and how difficult is that for people? Because this is, again, dealing with kids, and we've all been teens and we've all been kids. They honestly think they're being unique when they're honestly being the same. I'll give you an example. Everybody's going to wear a white T-shirt today. Everybody's wearing white T-shirts. Everybody's walking around with their pants pulled down. Everybody's doing, and they honestly think they're being unique when actually they're all being the same, because it's the person that stands up and says, well, you know what? Wearing your pants hanging down is silly. I'm not going to do that. Yes. That's the one that's kind of like thinking for him or herself. Yes.
So what I like to call that is that's unique contribution, right? And so we all should be striving to be making our unique contribution to the world. And I am a firm believer that the world is desperate for all of our unique contribution. And the last thing you want to do is just give what everybody else gives, right? Because
Right.
it's already been given. So let's look at how do we make a unique contribution. More importantly, how do we make our unique contribution? And that's to make sure that it's born from these things that matter most to us. And the interesting part and why this is so difficult. So there's a couple of different ways that you can discover what your black sheep values are. The sort of long road would be to go through what Maslow calls peak experiences and dive back through your history and look at these peak experiences and why you felt what you felt and what were the different things within that moment that really drove these feelings and decisions that you had made. But most people are too afraid to take that route. And so what I did was I created an online assessment that really helps you sort of just dip your toe into the values pool and get the conversation started. And this assessment's at findyourblacksheep.com. You simply click on Find Your Flock. And what it does is the first part of the assessment presents you with 125 commonly held personal core values. And it asks you to just read through these words really quickly. And then in this knee-jerk sort of reaction, any word that really resonates with you, go ahead and select it, right? And so you're going to read through this list and you see words like achievement and you go, okay, I like that. Accountability. Oh, I like that. Accomplishment. Okay, I like that. Empathy. You just start going through and it gives you this sort of list, A to Z. What we know over the last 2 years and thousands of people taking this assessment is that the average person selects at least 30 words that are incredibly important to them.
Right. That makes sense.
What we know, right? What we know is that 30 words is an impossible task for you to honor every day.
Right.
But you're going to try and you're going to fail because it's just not possible. And then you're going to invite feelings like shame and disappointment and anxiety into the picture because you're not perfect. And so what we do is we take that subset of words, that 30, 40, 50 words that you selected, and we group them by likeness. So we say, okay, words like empathy and sympathy go together. Words like accomplishment and success go together. And before you know it, you've got 5 buckets of words, and then you have to select what's the one word in each bucket that you cannot live without. This is the non-negotiable part. What's the one word that you cannot live without? And that gives you your initial, what I call your flock of 5. It's your flock of 5 black sheep values.
And then that way you can really kind of concentrate. You can whittle it down and really focus on the ones that really are your non-negotiables.
Right. That gets you into the sort of first step into identifying what you think your black sheep values are. But what we also know that the data has told us over the years is that 2 or 3 of those words that you come to on that first pass through are absolutely 100% true. You can give us 15 or 20 different examples for every word as to why they are incredibly important and why they indeed are black sheep values. But we also know that 2, perhaps 3 of those words are complete and total fabrication.
Right.
They are who you want to be or who somebody told you should be, but they are not actually your sheep. So you are caring for someone else's sheep. And when that's the case, you're taking food off the table for the things that matter most to you.
Wow. I'm looking here back in the book, and another thing that leaped out at me was the fact that once you get to that point, once you get to that, your truth, if you will, as you say in the book, you actually magnetize. You magnetize the people and the situations and everything you need for what your truth and everything to happen. Yeah.
The idea is, when I discovered these things that I believed were my black sheep values, and then I went through the process of proving that they were indeed mine and sort of having that evidence that I could present to anybody to show them this is why these are the things that matter most to me. I had that sort of figured out for a year or two. I hadn't experienced the transformation in my life that I thought it would bring until I realized that I had to actually speak those values into existence. I had to choose when and where these values appeared in my life. So my life didn't really change until January of 2019. In January of 2019, I began the practice of literally writing my black sheep values into my daily calendar. I'd pull out my calendar, my plan for the day. I'd look at my appointments. And next to every appointment that you saw with whomever I was meeting with, you would see one or more of my black sheep values written into the appointment, because I was going to actually speak that value into existence during that time. I wasn't going to wait for an accident or luck or that perfect moment to appear. I was going to actually drive the conversation through that value. And when I started to do that, within 6 months, my number of times that I was speaking tripled. My speaking fee tripled. The article comes out naming me one of the top 10 motivational speakers in the country, alongside Magic Johnson and Jack Nicklaus and Amy Cuddy from Harvard. And
wow,
when that happened, Mark, I have to tell you that I had an incredible bout of imposter syndrome when this article comes out, and I see my name next to some heroes of mine just growing up, and I had a really difficult time accepting it, and it took me about a year before I figured out why I was on that list, and what I've come to realize is that if you take the time to define these non-negotiables in your life, and you start to live your life with deliberate intention, and you start to speak these things into existence, it was just as rare as Magic Johnson's NBA Hall of Fame career. It was just as rare as Jack Nicklaus winning 18 majors, or Amy Cuddy's incredible work that she's done. And that should be both incredibly sad and exciting at the same time, to know that there are so few people living their lives with deliberate intention, and that it can absolutely be the competitive advantage that leads to that life of fulfillment that everybody deserves, if they're willing to do a little bit of work to define these things in their life.
No, absolutely right. It's interesting in terms of, and because the impetus for this show was to encourage people to read more. Mm-hmm. And I was another book that I was reading, and was talking about every day you should do something for self-development and self-improvement. And one of the things they were recommending was reading self-improvement, self-help books, or books such as Black Sheep.
Sure.
And it was saying how, for the most part, you have a significant number of people who don't read at all. I mean, they will not pick up a book. They haven't picked up a book in years. They won't do anything in terms of developing themselves. And where I'm going with this is what you just said. For the few people that do it, and when I say few, I'm talking, percentage-wise. But for the percentage that do it, it is the differentiator. For the people who are trying to better themselves on a daily basis, whether it's through writing, like you just said, because there is power in the written word. There is power in the spoken word. And you're right, when you mesh the two, things do begin to happen.
Yes.
So, but there's very few people. It's kind of like the example I was giving to you with the kids. Okay, everybody in the class, we're gonna wear white T-shirts. Mm-hmm. Like that's the style. But nobody wants to break the style. So the style is, well, we just gonna go along to get along. We're not gonna try to improve ourselves or do anything different. So that's why you get the masses just kind of going along to get along, and then you'll get somebody like yourself who will step out there and get a totally different result.
Well, you can't, and this is what I believe, you can't do anything in your life on purpose until you define these things.
Correct.
You can't, because you have to do these things in alignment with your purpose, and you can't choose a purpose that's real in your life until you know what these non-negotiable black sheep values are, because your purpose is born from those values. So, my black sheep values: creativity, hope, impact, empathy, family, and authenticity, right? I say flock of 5. I have 6. I needed an extra. It's not unusual for someone to have an extra. So for me, those values, when I finally found that these were my non-negotiables, I could choose a purpose that actually activated these values. So while you hear creativity, hope, impact, empathy, family, authenticity, my purpose, the reason I get up every day, is to creatively impact people's lives by authentically providing hope. It sounds familiar because it's filled with my black sheep values. They are in alignment with each other. My what and my why are together. And when those two things are together, your how you're going to honor that, how you're going to find fulfillment, or how are you going to live your life making decisions on a daily basis becomes incredibly easier when your what and your why are aligned.
Absolutely. I'm sitting here looking through your titles for each chapter. I see unconscious creators, good decisions, the biggest lie about purpose, a bone-crushingly honest conversation, playing favorites, digging for truth, practical manifestation, and then the conclusion is change starts now. Now, for the most part, we've kind of, as we've chatted this morning, talked about many. Was there any of those that you really want to emphasize more than the other, or talk a little bit about, kind of how you came up with the titles, or anything you want to talk about in terms of now that I've given out the titles of the book? Because listening audience, like I said, it's seven chapters here in the table of contents and the conclusion.
So the goal that I had when writing this book was I wanted it to be able to be read sort of in one cross-country flight, right? So I spend most of my life on a plane, traveling from one conference to the next. And so, I'm doing, 70 or so conferences a year. And so I am constantly traveling. And as I am sitting there going, gosh, what I really want is somebody to be able to pick up the book, and by the time the wheels touch the ground in the city that they are arriving at, they have read the book and have sort of started themselves on the path to discover these things in their life. So, the idea of some of these chapters, unconscious creators is really where everybody is right now. If you can't tell me what your 5 non-negotiable values are and how you speak them into existence every day, then you are an unconscious creator. You are not doing anything on purpose. You're winging it, and it makes it really difficult for you to find that fulfillment and ultimate success that you want when you're winging it. And so that's where we start in the book. It moves from there a little bit further into the biggest lie about purpose. And that biggest lie about purpose is that purpose is something you find. That's just not true.
Right.
Purpose is something you choose. And in order for it to be a meaningful choice, you actually have to define these things in your life so that you can make a choice that is in alignment with these values. And so that is the biggest lie about purpose. And it's one of the things that I think people are shocked at when they first read it, because they've been told their whole lives that purpose is something that they should be out trying to find. When it comes to this bone-crushingly honest conversation, you have to get real with yourself.
Correct.
Have to be okay. You have to be okay with understanding that it's okay that you can't control outcomes, right? It's okay that you haven't achieved everything that you wanted to in your life. You're not perfect. And so you have to start to ask yourself some really difficult questions to get to the truth.
Correct.
And as you sort of go a little bit further, the thing about playing favorites is, there's a reason that we have favorites. And the reason that we have favorites from a biological standpoint is that our favorites connect our head and our heart. And when our head and our heart connect, it engages your limbic brain. And your limbic brain is where all of your emotional long-term memory is stored. And it's the reason why you remember lyrics to songs. It's the reason why you remember your favorite quotes from movies. It's these things that are in your heart that has these experiences that your mind can remember. And that's why we have favorites. Well, when we look at what our favorites are, what you're really looking at are breadcrumbs that lead you back to these black sheep values. The reason that it's a favorite is because it resonates with an experience in your head and a value in your heart that you have held on to, even if you haven't recognized it yet. And so often one of the things that I do for people for fun is to have them tell me what is one of their favorite movies of all time. And then we sort of dig in and define what they remember about the movie. And just by listening to them describe the movie, I can give them a pretty good idea of 1, 2, or 3 values that they should be looking to confirm that might be one of their black sheep values. And so that's sort of the entertaining part of the book, is that I'm not going to send people into a boring, white lab coat. Let's do this 400 question assessment. I'm not going to do that, because I wouldn't do that. I can't subject myself to that type of torture. And so, this is for the person who just wants to say, I know that there's something out there for me in my life that's more than what I have right now. And so this is a little guide to help you get there, but you're going to have to do the work. You cannot wing this and think that you're going to find the success. It is difficult work, and I'll give you a perfect example. So I'm in the middle of a 5-week class of sort of teaching people once a week. We're walking through the book. They had to register for this class, and it was sort of in the course of 5 weeks, we're going to find your black sheep. We're going to prove that they're real. We're going to teach you to write a purpose statement for your life, and we're going to talk to you about speaking those things into existence. We had 200 people sign up for the course in week 1. We just passed week 2, and there's already been a 50% attrition rate. Why is that? Because this is hard work. And when people realize that they actually have to do some work, they immediately decide that it's much easier to wing it. So I'm just going to keep winging it. I'm alive. I'm doing okay. And I'm just going to continue to wing it in my life. And that's okay. You know what? There are going to be people who continue to do it. There will be people who do it to the day that they die. But for those that are yearning for something more, that are waiting for that push to say, there is a life of fulfillment that you have yet to experience, this book is going to help you get there if you're willing to do the work.
And that's the key right there. And again, it's what is it? I'm trying to think of that saying, how they said it. It's in jest, but they'll say it's not hard to be outstanding in that field. A lot of times people say, you're outstanding. I'm like, well, it's not that hard to be outstanding in that field. So that's kind of like, there's so many who are, and I don't even want to say unwilling. Some may be unwilling. Some just can't. Some don't have the time, whatever. But because the numbers are relatively low speaking, that's why it's really not that hard to stand out in that field, because there's so few who are really willing to do the work.
Yeah, I think it was, I'm not exactly sure. I think it was Zig Ziglar who said that there's very little traffic in the extra mile.
Right? That's right.
And that's just the case. And it's the same with this. And so I look at it like, if you are looking for a competitive advantage in life, if you're looking for a competitive advantage at work, you have to define these things, because when you do, you can bring your unique contribution to the table. And when you bring that unique contribution to the table, you get people's first look. And when you get people's first look, that's worth something. And so that's how you find yourself getting promoted. That's how you find yourself having opportunities that haven't presented themselves, because they're looking at you right now like you're one of those 495 other sheep that look exactly the same. Right.
And see, I like that exercise you were just talking about, the favorite movie piece, because, that would be revealing. I would think that would be revealing in terms of that, because I'm just sitting here like I have I actually have 3 favorite movies, and then they're all. So give me one of them. What's one of your favorite 3? Top Gun. Top Gun. Okay. So for someone in the audience that's listening right now that maybe has never seen Top Gun, give them the 30-second Cliff Notes synopsis. What's the movie about? Well, the movie's about aviators, and it's about a young aviator who experienced instances or difficulties in his life. He's fighting his own demons, but he is an extremely good fighter pilot. but he's fighting his own demons. And by the end of the movies, he has come, like that reflection you're talking about. His life experiences have brought him to the point where he had to look at himself. And once he stopped fighting those demons, or understood what the demons were, he was able to move on to a different level. He wasn't just an excellent fighter pilot. He also became a very good person.
Mm-hmm. So, part of the reason that I have people do that is it's in the words that you choose to describe what it is that you just described that we start to find those breadcrumbs, right? So from listening to you describe the movie like you just did, what I would tell you is that I heard themes of perseverance. I heard themes of competitiveness. I heard themes of discovery. I heard themes of personal growth. And so when you take the assessment and you start to look and see, if I don't see words like that are sort of being considered in your flock, then that leads to a conversation as to, are you drilling down too deep to a specific value that might only show itself every now and then? Are you sabotaging yourself in some way and not allowing a value to appear in your life? And so those are the sorts of things. So I would expect to see, at least in that first bucket of words, I would expect to see every one of those words that you just explained to me. And if you didn't select one of those words, I would have to ask you a few questions as to why you didn't select them, just from the vocabulary that you chose. Because when something's your favorite, you use very specific words to describe it. For somebody else, right, that maybe Top Gun wasn't their favorite movie, they would go, I don't know, it's a pilot movie. They sing some songs at a bar. Tom Cruise is chewing gum the whole time. There's it's a little annoying. He ends up getting his partner killed. Right. And it's really, it's like that. It's very different when it's not your favorite, right?
Correct.
And so it's because it's your favorite that the words that you are choosing are very deliberate. And that's why we start looking there.
Excellent example. And interesting, you picked up on perseverance, definitely. Mm-hmm. Personal growth, for sure. Definitely. I forget the third or fourth one that you said, but no question. Discovery, yes. That's right.
Education, right?
Correct.
So, yeah.
That's right. Yeah. so yeah, that's interesting. It read it that quick, like 2 minutes.
It's one of those. I feel like I'm a tarot card reader. It's like, it's not really, it's just science. And so when you are aware of the science that you're looking for, it's really incredible to watch these things align. And it's not a parlor trick. It's just something that doing it a few thousand times with a few thousand people, you really start to see the patterns, and you really start to understand sometimes what people say is not necessarily what they mean. And so it takes a little bit of time, because when you start getting in, especially someone like yourself, so you've spent your life, I would also argue 100% that creativity is one of your black sheep.
Yes, it is.
Just from the sheer things that you've already done in your life and what I know about you now. So when I look at that, though, when it comes to things like education, right, somebody might look and select something like learning or knowledge as one of their values. And something like knowledge and discovery are very similar in one way. If you're looking at the big bucket, they're very similar to each other.
Correct.
But when we drill down and we start to find and track and look for proof, something like discovery is about the act of discovering new things. So you do things specifically because you get a rush from learning something new.
Correct.
That's different than knowledge, which would be obtaining knowledge that you have that you can use at some time in the future. So do you care that you know it, or do you care about the journey that it took to find it? And that is how we start to separate things that are similar on the surface, but really are two different things when we start to dive into them.
Wow. I see here on the website, I'm looking here again back on your website. It says, I've learned over the years that change is inescapable, constant, and many times overwhelming. I want to help people adjust and cope with unexpected change. And we're talking about your first book, but the thing that caught my eye was I see that was by Delilah. National syndicator. I'm a big fan of Delilah's. I would love to get her on the show, but I don't know contractually whether we could do that radio to radio thing. But I would love to get her on the show as well. And what caught my eye when I saw her name there, I've read her book as well.
Yeah, Delilah's amazing. I've known her for many, many years. I was doing a concert. I was performing a concert in Oregon, out near where she lives.
Right.
And that's she had attended a concert of mine, gosh, probably 10 years ago now. And that book, Rock and Roll With It, we've donated 10% of the royalties of that book back to Delilah's nonprofit, which does work in Ghana.
Is that the point of light or light point or point something like that?
Point Hope.
Point Hope. That's it. Yeah, because I remember because I read the book and I started donating to it myself. Again, I'm a big fan of Delilah's. I listened to her show and listened to her advice and wisdom and everything. So when I saw her name on there, I was like, oh, there she is. It's Delilah. I've read her book as well. I listened to her show also. Like I said, I would love to get her on here, but like I said, I kind of know radio contract. Like it wouldn't be no issue for me. It might be for her, depending on. But even reading her story on how many stations and jobs she's lost and the tragedy she's had in her life. So that's why I say a lot of people think because you're, seen or heard by a lot of people that, again, life's tragedies don't impact you, but it does. So I just say all that to say I saw her name on there and it caught my eye and I was like, oh, all right. So that's good. You know her. Absolutely outstanding. So I'll tell you what, we're down at the end of our chat here. But at this point, this is what I do. I turn my mic off and you have the opportunity to promote. And the only thing you cannot say is a dollar amount because folks can work that out with you when they get in touch with you. But in terms of any other shout outs, the book just dropped. So any book signings, any workshops, anything that you want to let the audience know that they can get in contact with you with. Matter of fact, all your social media, your websites, this is your opportunity to promote. I'm going to turn the mic off and you can go at it with the exception of a dollar amount.
All right. Well, thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate the time this morning. What I will tell people is if you want to reach out, I'm very active on social media. You can find me simply at Brant Menswar, BrantMenswar. On any social platform, that's where you're going to find me. I would highly encourage you to go online and take the free assessment. It's at findyourblacksheep.com, which is where you can find links to buy the book wherever you want to, whether it's Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Books A Million or wherever you're at. You can also take the assessment there as well. The assessment will send you back as soon as you finish. It will send you back an immediate email with a nice little summary of the things that are important to you, what your non-negotiables are, and what the next steps are. I would highly recommend you do that. Start on this journey to discovering who you truly are, and you will not be disappointed in what you discover.
All right. Well, I thank you so much and I never can tell my guests if they're early morning people or night people or when, but like I said, because the show is so early, I'm always extremely appreciative of those who wake up early to join me. And so I appreciate the fact, even though you're on the same time zone I'm in, still it's 7 o'clock in the morning. So some people, they say, oh, that's my best time of the day. For other people, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm on the radio at 7 o'clock in the morning. So I thank you so much and wish you nothing but the best. Again, listening audience, the very simple title to the book. You can't forget this. If you've heard the colloquialism, if you've heard the cliche, if you've heard the term black sheep, that's the name of the book. Black Sheep Unleash the Extraordinary, Awe-Inspiring, Undiscovered You. And the author is Brant. That's who we've been talking to for the last hour or so. Brant Menswar. Menswar. Brant, again, thank you. And, we'll be in touch because I record this and I archive it on my YouTube channel and I usually send the guest the link and you can do whatever you want with it at that point. It's yours.
Fantastic.
All right.
Look forward to it.
All right. Thanks a lot. We'll be in touch.
Sounds good.
Take care.